Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavirindravavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vitvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Chinmayam Vyapiyat Sarvam Lokyam Sacharacharam Padam Narshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namah. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namah. Om Shri Chinmaya Satgurave Namah. Satchidananda Rupaya Vishnudpatyata Hetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Namaha. Shri Krishnaya Vayam Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya. Natavaranagar Hari Vasudevaya. Sarva Sukha Sagara Hari Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya Hari Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad Shri Krishna Kanaya Lal Ki Jai. Whatever we pursue in life, let it be a stepping stone for us to be able to attain the final goal of moksha. So we pursue Dharma, Artha, Kama, mostly. We don't really pursue moksha. We pursue Dharma, Artha, Kama. When we pursue Artha, it is for the purpose of Dharma. We pursue Dharma for the purpose of moksha. Even when we pursue Kama, still let it be within the confines of Dharma, and that Dharma will slowly guide us to moksha. So even if right now moksha isn't our ultimate goal, let it be that we walk in that direction. So we get to that goal. And so the story of Daksha Prajaya yesterday is to show in the pursuit of Dharma, Dharma is not accomplished unless we are invoking the Lord. And Dharma is not accomplished when we have animosity in our heart, because it creates hate or anger or spite and pettiness. Like when we think about it, when we don't like someone, we can become so petty. So, Dharma cannot be pursued when these negativities fill our heart. And so, when Daksha has so much pride and wanting to do things just to spite Lord Shiva and to show his power, that act, even though it's an act of worship, even though it's would normally consider a sattvic action, is not worship. Worship is when our hearts are filled with love, even if the action is not a formal worship. Right? There's a beautiful story of Lokmanya Tilak, and he had visited a friend's house, and the mother is telling the son, your father's very busy today, you go and do the puja. And the son says, but Tilakji doesn't do any puja. Why are you making me do? Because he's held as a idol, as a hero in India, right? And the mother says, shh. But already Tilakji had heard this, right? So he waits for the boy to come out and says, you should listen to your mom. You should definitely do puja. And he's a kid, so he don't do. And he said, yes, I do. He said, I've never seen you do puja. So he asked, whose puja do you do? He said, come, I show you. He takes the boy to the roof of the building, and you can see all the people walking on the street. And he said, their puja. If it's an action that we do, lifting our mind, dedicating it to the Lord, it's puja. Yeah. It's Dharma. So we saw Dharma. Now, in the series, to show the point of how even when we seek Artha, let it take us to the Lord. One of the cutest, most beautifulest story in the Bhagavatam is of a little bhakta called Dhruv. His namesake is why we are remembering Bhagwan this week. And so we're invoking that Supreme Bhagwan's compassion to bless our Dhruv as we narrate this story of Bhakta Dhruv. Little Dhruv was 5 years old. But before we get to him, we have to do hierarchy. The entire Bhagavatam is the story of creation. Remember, Manu and Shatarupa were created and sent to earth to progenate. And then Manu's one daughter, Devahuti's story we've already seen. Now his son he has two sons, Priyavata, who we'll be seeing the story of later, and Uttapada. He was a very accomplished king. He got married to two wives, Surichi and Suniti. Now the word Suniti means good conduct. It has the sense of neat, properly measured, right thing in the right place. The word Surichi means that which pleases. Unfortunately, they can be different. What is right should be pleasing, but not all. And in fact, in Katha Upanishad and even in the Gita, two words are used, Shreyas and Preyas. You're familiar with the words. Preyas, pleasurable at first, and then later on, there's a aftertaste or a sting or a unpleasantness about it. And the best example is overeating. While eating, we enjoy the taste, but afterwards you're so uncomfortable, and then there's acidity, and then there's burping, and then there's all the rest of it comes, and then we can't sleep. And such a small example, right? But then it can be such a big example. It's pleasant in the moment to tell the person what you think, especially if what you have to say is a little bit witty. Such satisfaction in telling it. And then days of discomfort, because now there's a strain in the relationship, you feeling bad that why you said it, they of course feeling very bad that you said it. And sometimes it's just days of discomfort. Sometimes it's years. In that moment, it appears to be pleasant, but in long term, it's unfavorable. Shreya is it. Short term, little bit, it's discomfort, unpleasant. Long term, the best example, simplest example is actually medicine today tastes very sweet. And they put so many flavors in it. But when we were kids, medicine. A little bit discomfort, but then so much relief from whatever element it is that we are suffering. Or a little bit control, and maybe you don't go somewhere or you don't do something, but then later on, fulfillment of something that is higher. The concepts are very familiar to us, and it's your first Balvihar lesson. So we've already definitely passed that stage and we understand it. So who was who? Surichi is prayers, that which is pleasing. From Surichi is born Uttama. From Suniti, what was Suniti? Shreyas, highest good, is born Dhruv. The word Dhruv comes from the root word in Sanskrit, dhra, which is also the word from which dhriti comes. Dhriti is fortitude, resilience, strength. So Dhruv too has the same meaning. It means strength. And true enough, this little boy was incredibly strong. So from that, when we discipline our mind, comes strength. When we give in to that which is pleasing, the result is not strength. It's okay sometimes, it's not horrendous, sometimes it is horrendous. Uttapadna favoured Surichi, that which is pleasing. Yeah. And so Sunita put a separate palace and kept a little bit away. But one day, Dhruv at 5 years old manages to come into the main palace. He sees his father around, and his brother is sitting on his father's lap, and the father is affectionately. So now any kid will want. That's his father too. So he wants to come and sit on the father's lap. But the father, because he knows that she and Suniti and then this one will get jealous and then she'll get anger, so he ignores Dhruv. Now seeing this, Surichi thinks, correct. And she tells Dhruv that, see, you weren't born from me. That's why you cannot sit on your father's lap. It's very hurtful words. That in itself already very, very hurtful. You're talking to a 5-year-old kid. Even there, if she had stopped, would have been okay. But then she goes further. She says, if you want to be able to sit on and be loved by your father, then go and pray to Bhagavan. Next life, you are born from my womb. This is not insult to only Dhruv. This is insult that we should pray and do this so that just you can get that birth from her womb, like, really too highly of herself here. Yeah. This is not the purpose of puja, and this is definitely not the purpose of doing tapas. But when arrogance fills our hearts and our minds, then it's so overwhelming. And because Uttapada didn't say anything, invested in her arrogance. Naturally, this 5-year-old boy is hearing some. Firstly, your father rejects you, and then this is something against your own mother. So he burst, he went, he's crying, and he doesn't tell his mother what happened. He's crying, she finds him. He doesn't even go to her because he doesn't want her to see him crying. Why? Because he doesn't want to say to her what happened because that's going to hurt her. Like even that, even at 5, that present to not want to hurt his mother and say what was said or repeat, and he wouldn't even want to those words. But fortunately, palaces, there's many, and their job is to go and report to the people who technically they shouldn't be telling exactly what had happened. And so Mother Suniti finds out everything. Now this is she's so true to her name. She goes to Dhruv and she pacifies him and she says, it's okay. I know you're sad but what your father did, it is what it is. And what your mother said, let's take from it the bits that are true. It is true that your father has got his permission by the grace of Bhagavan. And that because your grandfather, Manu, had his position by the grace of Bhagavan. So what she said is true. If we want something, pray to Bhagavan and do tapas and invoke his grace. But what should you ask for? Don't ask for small things. Ask for that position which nobody can take from you. So her advice, the cleanest heart. She doesn't criticize the other wife. She only takes, yes, if we want help, go to Bhagwan. And she amends the bit that needs to be amended. What to ask? Ask for that when you don't have to go keep asking. Yeah. In little Dhruv's determination. His mother finished speaking and he decided, yes, this is what I will do. And so he gets out of the bed, the house, and starts walking into the forest. He's not even taken anything with him. He just starts walking into the forest. And here the Bhagavatam says, Bhagwan is watching, sees 5-year-old Dhruv walking into the forest, and he immediately tells Narad Muni, whatever you're doing, stop and go now. My child needs you. And Narad Muni, also aware of the happenings in the entire universe, thinks, wow, this little boy is going to be my best and brightest student ever. And he is also excited to go and meet Dhruv. And with such confidence, and like a true Kshatriya that he is, Dhruv is walking into the forest fearlessly determined. I am going to pray to Bhagwan and I am going to see Bhagwan and I am going to get this boon. And so when Narad Muniji comes, Narad Muni pacifies him and says, where are you going? Where are you running to? Only 5 years old. This is not the time to be doing tapas. You grow up a little bit, then if you go and do tapas, nobody will stop you. But at 5, there's no need for you to. Tapas is very difficult. So you need to grow up to be able to do the tapas. And Dhruv says, I can't see how it's difficult. In fact, I just left the house and you have already come. And even though he is 5, he says, doesn't it mean that Bhagwan already answered my prayers because he has sent me a guru? Because you are here. So since you have come now, you please instruct me on how to be able to get darshan of Bhagwan. His absolute clarity, huh? Naraji tried saying, forest is dangerous, there's tigers, what you'll eat, you'll miss your mom. Nothing, nothing, nothing. He didn't listen. You too small, wait till you grow up, nothing. He didn't listen to anything. Straight away he answered, but you are here. Which means Bhagwan already blessed me. And then Narad Muni gives full instructions the banks of Yamuna, how every day bathe in Yamuna, how to do the tapas. He gives instructions of pranayama technique, and then what to eat, when to eat, and then the mantra that he has to chant, which is the one we started today's talk with. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Dhruv goes. But in the palace, the moment his father heard that he has left the palace to go to the forest, guilt consumes his father. How could I have neglected my son? How could I have been so petty? He's just a 5-year-old kid. Why didn't I just stand up to Surichi? Why didn't I let him sit on my lap? The amount of guilt he was ridden with and sorrow, and it was torture for his father. And he kept going out from the palace to the forest and, how to bring him back and please bring him back. And at that moment, Narad Muni, after he has taught Dhruv what to do, goes back to the palace and eats Uttapada and says, you have to worry. You think it's your responsibility to look after Dhruv, but actually he belongs to Bhagwan. Exact line written here. And from this moment on, Bhagwan will look at him. He also gives the assurance that he will accomplish great things and will live to be a better king then you. And so the father is pleased. Now, Dhruv, on the other hand, this tapas that he does, wow. He eats only once a day for 1 month. The next month, he eats only 1 leaf a day, similar to the story of Parvati. The next month, he drinks only water. And then for the next month, he drinks water only every 9 days. And phenomenal amount of tapas. And the pranayama, I forget which month, how he does, but at one stage, he's breathing in today, he'll breathe out tomorrow. That much control he had over in like 3-4 months. And so by the 5th month, he stops breathing. He can hold his breath for a whole month. Now, when he gets level where he has controlled himself perfectly that he can even hold his breath, to sustain that body, because our physical body needs, his breath becomes one with all the air in the world. And so air is sustaining him. Yeah. Because when we're doing tapas, Bhagwan is protecting. And for us to be able to keep doing, he is going to need the oxygen, he's going to need the air. So all of the air that exists becomes one with his very breath. And so air is sustaining him, not even though he's not breathing. Now, when his breath becomes one with the total breath and he's holding his breath, air stops moving. All the other creatures start getting very restless because they've not perfected such control and they need to breathe. And at this 5th month, he is standing on one leg. And so the earth actually tilts because once again, the whole of totality has become one with him in his single pointedness of his devotion. He wouldn't even open his eyes at this point. And so all the creatures go running to Bhagwan to say, please, please help. The earth is tilted and we can breathe. And Bhagwan said, anyways, I was going to go. And usually it's the bhakta pining and waiting to see Bhagwan. But in this case, it was Bhagwan wanting to come and see his bhakta. Often in the Bhagavatam it is Bhagwan wanting to come and see his bhakta. And so Bhagwan comes and he's just looking at the little boy with this intensity of concentration in his face as he is doing his tapas. And so engrossed he is in his tapas, he doesn't know Bhagwan's come. Because he has the image of Bhagwan in his mind described perfectly to him. And so he kept that image in his mind. And so he's so focused on that, he doesn't even know that Bhagwan's actually come and is standing in front of him. And so Bhagwan takes away the image from his mind. And because he's been so focused, it's a startle for that image to go away, and he opens his eyes and he sees Bhagwan in front of him. He bows down and he stands up and he is so overwhelmed with devotion that he opens his mouth, but no words are coming out because he's been so focused and been turned inwards with such intensity, not even a full 6 months, approximately. Close to 6 months, such a short period, but it was so intense, not anymore. The voice wasn't coming out, he couldn't remember language, and also so much joy in seeing Bhagwan that Bhagwan understood and takes his conch and touches Dhruv's cheek. Now, it seems like such a small action, but all the Vedas are in the conch. And so in that moment, Bhagwan gives Dhruv all knowledge. And so now that his voice comes out, it's pretty much open what he is saying, that you are the power behind my eyes, power behind my speech, you are the power behind my breath. In Ishavasya Upanishad, there's that exact verse of Dhruv is saying. And then further he says, praising Bhagavan about how infinite you are and how infinite is your creation. And he mentions what was said in Canto 2 about all of creation, which is creation have no idea where it starts and ends, and we think we know. Not creation starts and ends. Creation starts with me. And the Canto 2 is, how do we know which is north, east, west, south? Usually we need a reference. From here, this is left. From here, this is right. And what's our reference point? Us. What's up and what's down? Reference point? Us. And so all direction and all space starts with me. All of space and all of time, we use me as our reference for starting point. Is happening in time and space. And I think it originates as me. All of creation is in me. Who's saying this? 5-year-old Dhruv to Bhagavan. Having understood the vastness and the depth of this knowledge from that immense tapasyacharya that he did, this darshan that he gets from the Lord. And now as he is Bhagavan about how you are infinite and you are the most, you are the only thing worth seeking. That's foolish are those who turn to you for anything else. He's 5. And he himself has turned to Bhagwan, wanting to sit on his father's lap. But his mother said, don't ask for that. Ask for that, after which you don't have to ask again. So ask for that which nobody can take away from me. But he himself saying this, now that he is looking at Bhagwan, I don't want anything else. Foolish is anybody who asks you for anything else except you. And Bhagwan smiled. I took careful of Bhagwan's smile. Said, but that's not what you started out doing your tapas for. And he said, I know. I started because of some petty words my stepmother said to me. And look at the maturity. When Narad Muniji was speaking, and actually Narad Muniji told him, you are too young to get so upset by a few words your stepmother says to you. And he says, exact, written in the Bhagavatam, I am a Kshatriya. Once I have decided something, you cannot stop me. Even if me back home now, I will not forgive my stepmother for saying those words to me. And so the forest is my only option now. Like he said with such, I am a Kshatriya. Like I will conquer. And now when Bhagwan is standing in front of him, it was foolish of me to get upset for petty words that my stepmother said. It is not worth asking for anything other than devotion. 5 and 6 months. Look at how much his thinking has been lifted. And Bhagwan's joy at listening to this little boy say these words. And Bhagwan grants him his original desire. Bhagwan also grants him that devotion will also be there, but he little bit has to wait for that. boon to be given to him. So Bhagavan says, I will give you what nobody else has. I will create a Dhruva Lok, and there you will be king for all of time, and nobody will ever be able to take it from you, which is now what we see as the star. But it's an actual lok. Lok means a realm of existence. Bhagwan made a heaven solely for Dhruv. He does this for one more devotee, Bali, later on. Like he can just create heavens. Yeah. But first, you will rule on earth for 36,000 years as a king before you go to Dhruvlok, where you will then stay for all of time. And with this boon, he's walking back home, but he has tears running down his face, because he keeps thinking, why did I ask for that? I should have asked for Bhagwan. In 6, nobody has gotten Bhagwan's darshan. I did asking for power. Even as he's walking back home, he is regretting it. But of course, as he's coming back home, so happy to receive him. His younger brother is so happy to receive him. They parade him around the town and they celebrate his return, and he's made king very soon. And he does. He rules very, very prosperously for 36,000 years, because Bhagwan's words have to come through. At one point, though, after many thousands of years, his younger brother, Uttama, goes into the forest and is killed by some yaksha. And then his mother goes in search of him, that's Surichi, and is burnt by a fire. And yet in the Bhagavatam, it's very clear that fire is, she burns in the fire as a result of her, she had said to Dhruv. Sometimes here in the Bhagavatam, this idea of karma is very stark. Dhruv gets so angry, how dare a yaksha kill my brother? And so you see that they had this beautiful, immense love for each other. And so he goes up to, which realm do the yakshas? And he fights with all the yakshas, like so strong and such this, you can see that Kshatriya like him, and he becomes so angry he was going to destroy all the yakshas. Grandfather Manu comes and says, Dhruv, what are you doing? You've had Bhagwan's darshan. How can you fall to so much anger now? Don't you remember that tapas you did and what was the point of life? And then immediately he calms down. But this point story made to say, even after Bhagwan's darshan, we can fall prey to Maya once again. And here, the saving grace is he listens. When Manu talks, and that's his grandfather, when elders and wise speak, he immediately listens. So that virtue is stronger than the vice. Because so often young kids, who are you to tell me what to do? You just said, I got darshan of Bhagwan, did you? Why are you telling me what to do? We can so easily just become so arrogant, so vain, so proud. But no, he immediately recognized if elder is talking, listen. And because he listens, because he gives up this anger, and he even apologizes to all the yakshas, Kuber, who is in charge of that realm, comes and asks him for any boon. This time he said, I'm not going to make the same mistake. The only boon worth asking for is never-ending devotion to Bhagwan. So at this point, he is granted that. So all the time passes, and when his 36,000 years are over, a chariot comes. Many people don't believe a chariot actually comes. But it's not an ordinary chariot. This word gets translated as chariot, but it's not what we think of when we see chariots. Yeah. Limitation of language. I guess if we see it, we'll recognize it. It's because it's not a physical thing that can take us to a non-physical place. Yeah. And we don't go in our gross bodies. But what's the last bit of the story, which is so profound, is Yamraj comes. Yamraj is the god of death, and says, everyone has to pass me to leave this earth. You don't. Because you have this boon and you have purified yourself. Do me the honor of still passing me and step onto the chariot after stepping onto. And so he is known, all given the title of one who has defeated, even though Yamraj himself offers his head to get onto that chariot. Yeah. And stop, don't go was his first words, and he's, where's my mom? I'm not leaving without her. But Suniti was already in a chariot in front of him, already on her way to Dhruvalok. And he and his mom both go to Dhruvalok. Here is with Naraji visiting them in Dhruvalok. And when Naraji visits them, Dhruv still regrets that he asked for Dhruvalok and not for Bhajan. And he shines so bright today to remind us, whatever else you want Bhagwan also. Actually, when we're ready, we'll want one first. That's the message that he shines on us every night from stars. Artha is, what did he want? What did he ask for? Position from which nobody can take me. Yeah. Power. Artha is also power. And even when he said, I am a Kshatriya, that sense of power, that aptitude. And here, we can pursue power and forget Bhagwan. But because Dhruv pursued power, turning to Bhagwan, he wanted to ask Bhagwan for that power. His desire evolved. He no longer wanted power. Because the more he meditated on Bhagwan, he realized that is the source of all power, which is so incredibly fulfilling. Whereas other powers that we have, they may fulfill us, not that they don't. But there's thorn, one of which is pride. And the only way to keep pride at bay is to know that our power comes from Bhagwan and Bhagwan alone. So Dharma, Artha. Mhm. Pursue even power through Bhagwan for Bhagwan. Then karma. Now, usually we think of karma as, sense desires. And they are. Sense desires are karma. But the story told here has very little to do with sense desires. So from Dhruv has two sons. One of them takes sannyas, one of them take over the kingdom. And that son has a few sons, and then that son has a few sons. And I think 4 generations later, there's Raja Anga. And he also marries a wife named Sunita. This is a little bit unusual story. So, actually, no. We've already seen Dumbu Karna, who was a horrible kid. So even this beautiful Raja Angad, he really wanted a kid, but he got a child by the name of Vena, every horrible trait you can think of, he possessed. And seeing this, he tried to correct his son, he tried to guide his son, and then he thought, this is too terrible, so he runs away. He takes sannyas and he goes into the forest, and then who's going to look after the kingdom? He said, Bhagwan, now you own. And this is interesting, huh? This is what he says to Bhagwan. Bhagwan, thank you for giving me such a horrible son. I will never want to have a son again. If you had given me a good son, I would have gotten attached. Interesting the way he looked at it. But Socrates also says this, every man should get married. You've heard this? Yes, Guruji says it, Swamiji says it. If your wife is a good one, you'll be happy. And if she's not, don't. So, in a similar way, King Anga is saying this about his son. Nobody wanted Vena to become the king, but he claimed the kingdom. I'm the king now. Vena got into power and said, from today, nobody is allowed to give charity. From today, break all the temples. Nobody is allowed to do any worship. Nobody is allowed to chant any mantras. Nobody is allowed to one list. The day he became king itself. And the priest, they thought this is ridiculous, and the rishis said we should guide him. He's only a child. When they came to guide him and say, you cannot make these, we should be worshipping Bhagwan, he said, what Bhagwan? I can't see any Bhagwan, but you can see me, right? Worship me. Again, so bold. People really, we might think, no, people actually do believe themselves worthy of worship and praise and attention. All of y'all are nodding. I'm going to keep Vena's story short. The rishis, hearing such vile things, they just said, hum. When they said it, Vena falls down dead. Look at the power of just one word, huh? But now there's no king. So, from his thighs, they do some churning ritual, and comes King Prithu and Queen Arichi, who are avatars of Bhagwan Vishnu and Lakshmiji. There's never been a king as amazing as King Prithu. So the first thing, this is a side note. I'm going to come back on the karma topic. I'm going to talk about this because it's just, I find it so incredibly important that we know this. Mother Earth, during the period where Vain was ruling and he barred religion and barred nutrients. And so here it said, stop producing food. But actually, food was there, but it had no nutrients. She took all the nutrients and hid it into the earth where it couldn't get to the food. And so naturally, people are starving. because here it said that she hid the food itself. But actually, it's not the food she hid. It was the nutrients that come that she has hid. And so the first thing that King Prithu does is go in search of to say, where's the food? It's the form of a cow, and she is running away from him. She's not going to run away from him for so, because he's also Bhagwan's avatar, and Mother Earth is wedded to Bhagwan. So it's just Leela that she's running. And finally, he says, and her answer is, people had become wicked. So under Vain's rule, because he was so selfish, everybody else also became selfish. And her answer is, when selfishness is high, the nutrients of our food will disappear. We don't even realize. We don't even realize that our frame of mind has such huge ramifications. You know, when the scriptures say that we only hurt ourselves, we hurt other people, we hurt ourselves. When we're angry, we hurt ourselves. When we're greedy, we hurt ourselves. This is such a perfect way of seeing it. When we're greedy, when we fish, when we're angry, when we're bitter, when our food loses its nutrients. You already know this, huh? And today we already know that the grains have less nutrients than they used to have 20 years ago, and the fruits have less vitamins that they used to have. And in our grandmother's era, used to be able to eat one bowl of rice and got everything. And today we have to take 5 different supplements. And where are those supplements coming from? Because the food doesn't have it. Like, did we even think about that? When Bhagwan and the say, we only create the world. How is that possible? We create the world. Our thinking, even how food grows, creating our world. And there is still nutrient food because there's still goodness. Into the world as it is right now, there still is goodness. And there still is devotion. So, pause and coming back to his story. So Gomata bows down to him and she releases all the nutrients, and then he does phenomenal. Like, you know, the scriptures has so much more knowledge than just devotional knowledge. There's so much of town planning knowledge on this because he's a king, right? And apparently the way he made the town is like phenomenally well planned, and his sense of architecture and his engineering. And I didn't read too much about that because we are going to focus on that. But it's here. All that knowledge here on town planning and engineering and architecture and management skills. And then he does what we call an Ashwamedha Yagna. And if you do 100 Ashwamedha Yagnas, it's considered to be like a, what would it be today? Like the highest accomplishment. Nobel Prize would be highest? No. Higher than, I don't know if we have such an accomplishment today, where it's full, your life is fulfilled. As a king, you've done 100 Ashwamedhas, then you know, no king has done 100. And he had done 19. And he was doing the 100th one. And because if you do 100 Ashwamedha Yagnas, then you become eligible for position. So Indra Devata got very scared. He'd done 99. This is the. He came and he stole the horse. And then Prithu's son is as great as Prithu, so he was challenged Indra, and so the arrow was going to shoot. So he left the horse and he ran back up to heaven. Then he started using all Mayavi techniques. to delude Prithvi, and then, but Prithvi is Bhagwan's Amsha, so he recognized this, and so he takes his arrow and he's about to shoot into the sky at Indra Devata. Immediately Brahma says, in the yagna, you are making offerings to Indra, and so if you shoot Indra, your yagna will not be complete. That becomes like stalemate. And also, why you want to do this 100 yagna? You're not going to want the seat of Indra. So this has now become a prestige issue. Immediately King Prithvi agrees and says, fine, I won't do this yagna. Let it be 99. It doesn't have to be 100. And totally recognizes that it's a prestige issue, totally recognizes he wanted the status and drops it. When he drops it, Bhagwan goes to Indra, picks him up and comes here on earth. And so Prithu gets Bhagwan's darshan and Bhagwan makes Indra apologize. And they hug, and Maharaj Prithu says, you keep Indra, don't want it. And he says, no, no, you finish your yagna. But actually, Bhagwan has manifested. And so yagna is complete. So what's karma here? Insistence of desire. Karma, I want chocolate cake. I want to look beautiful, dressed beautiful. Those are also karma, no doubt. But those karmas, we know already. Small. The desires that really stop us from seeing Bhagwan is when our desires become that insistence. When it's for something like just one up. I just have to be better than you. I just have to get this status. I just have to. And so interesting here, the story that focuses on karma is not the small ones. It's the ones where I'm wrong and we get fixated. Remember, this whole chapter is to remind us, you can have, but first desire Bhagwan. And if the desire you are having is stopping you from Bhagwan, drop it. And that's exactly what King Prithu did. The minute he realized, I've become fixated, I'm being insistent. It's not serving the purpose that it should be serving. And that's the question. That's the question we need to ask ourselves. What purpose is this serving? And so King Prithu then collects all his students. He teaches them. He teaches them what is the duty of a king. And then he tells them, please make sure I uphold it. He then teaches them the duty of the citizens and tells them, please uphold it. And then he does Bhagavad Gita. Because duty of the king is to ensure that Bhagwan is praised at all times. He then, after many years, and this is a trend, I remember when I was teaching Bhagavatam in the class, then at one point I said there was a king, and all the class rolled their eyes and said, did he go to the forest? Because every king in the Bhagavatam at some point leaves his kingdom to the forest. But when he went to the forest, it was also beautifully landscaped. And like when we go to botanical gardens, and how he didn't even know the forest was so beautiful, and it can't be so beautiful like how it is now. So he inquired, and he didn't know he had a brother named Nishant, who was born before him, who didn't want to be the king, so he ran away to the forest. And while Prithu was ruling the kingdom, this brother building dams and shapes and making landscape and letting him build this perfect kingdom King Prithu had. He didn't even know. His kingdom was so beautiful and he didn't even realize somebody was doing this. And then the line is so nice that he says, so much of the glory is yours, but credit for it. People didn't see you and only saw me. So many times we feel like that. Our parents, our gurus, our friends, our families, they support us so much. And then we get all the credit. Or we get all the attention. And here, he himself didn't know how much was being done to make his kingdom look so incredibly beautiful. But because he was pious, because he was devoted, the two brothers now lived very, very happily in the forest doing tapas. And both of them attained Bhagwan. The Balvihar kids would say that also. And they got Bhagwan. Of course they did. This is the Bhagavatam. The last story in this canto, many times we think these stories are made up. Like a kid with cow's ears, and then Rakshasas doing such, like, are they even real? What's very interesting to note is that the next story in the Bhagavatam, at the moment, we are listening to Sage Maitreya talking to Vidur, which is being narrated by Shukdev Maharaj to King Parikshit. Here, Sage Maitreya says, this is not a real story. This story is made up by Narad Muni to teach Prachinna Bhari. As y'all can tell, I've written down all the names. Which means, unless it's specified that this story is made up, the other stories are true. A clear note is made when the story is not true. Okay, now you're going to have to little bit forgive me with this story. It's a little bit complicated and I'm going to try my best to get it right. So there's a king, Parichinbari, and he is very, very attached to doing rituals. And he has 10 sons who are called the Parichitas. Why? Because they loved each other so much, they all seem to be the same age. Not twins, but 10 born at what? 10less. No, I don't think it's impossible for a woman to carry maybe. No, is it impossible? We'll have to Google. Point. They didn't want different names. They all had the same name. So they were called Paricheta 1, Paricheta 2, Paricheta 3, Paricheta 4. They love each other so much. This is the cute bit of the story. They all go out on a picnic one day and they're enjoying the scenery and enjoying the scenery. They think Bhagwan is so beautiful and Lord Shiva manifests and teaches them. And so they become enlightened. Now we pause there. They're not the important ones. The father, who is stuck in rituals, Narad Muni thinks this poor king is not going to grow unless somebody comes in, teaches him. And so Narad Muniji comes to him and asks him, do you know the source of happiness and how to remove sorrow? And the king is very startled. Suddenly a Mahatma comes and asks also such this profound question. And he says, no, I don't know. But you have come, so please. And so sincerely wanting to learn. So Narad him this story. Once upon a time, a king called Puranjana. This is the made-up story from Once Upon a Time, his made-up story. There was a king called Puranjana. Puranjana had a very good friend called Anigyata. The two of them set out on a journey together. Along the journey, Puranjaya sees a beautiful city with 9 gates, or a beautiful palace with 9 gates, and fascinated by it, he goes inside and he sees an extremely beautiful lady with many servants, 10 servants serving her. And he asks her, "Who are you? Where are you from? And who are your parents?" And she says, "I don't know. But what does it matter? Let's get married." I correctly remembered. She said that. That is what she said. So they get married. And Puranjaya becomes so besotted with her that when she cries, he cries. When she eats, he eats. When she runs, he runs. When he can't bear to see her angry with him, and so he gives her anything that she wants. After living together for a very long time, happily, there are these fires that come into their kingdom. And when the kingdom is burning, his only thought is, where is she? Where's my beautiful wife? And she's burnt by the fire, and he's burnt by the fire. Because his last thought was, my wife, my wife, my wife, he is born again as a woman. And as a woman, he grows up, or she grows up, and falls in love with King Malayadruva, Malayadruraja. They also live very happily, and she's now besotted with him. And she's constantly thinking about him. But he is interested in bhakti and devoting his life to Bhagwan. So he takes her with him to the forest where he is meditating. And in his meditating, he leaves the body. When she realizes that he's left his body and she's left alone, she's weeping and weeping and weeping. And at that point, the friend, remember the friend whose name is Anijata, don't you remember? How can you forget me? How can you forget who you are? And explains. And now the explanation is by Narad Muni to King Prachinbhari. Who is this king? The Jiva. It's walking, and he sees a 9-gated city, our body. Our body in the Gita is described as a 9-gated city. Eyes, nose is 2, ears is 2, mouth. And then inside this 9-gated city, he meets in who is our mind. When the mind cries, we cry. When the mind dances, we dance. When the mind, whatever the mind does, we do. When the mind stands, stand up. When the mind sits down, we sit down. We become so enamored with our mind, and we think we are one with our mind. And whatever we think about, we become. And so thinking about his wife, when he dies, he becomes a woman. And here, when Avijataha is Guru or Bhagwan or scriptures that comes to remind us, but you're not this body. And you're not this. And you remember you're not this mind and you're not this body. You can go back to being who you really are. You are not a jiva, because a jiva is limited. You are Paramatma. So Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Moksha is hard to explain, but explain in this mystical, symbolic story. And the important bit of the story is that this friend is always with us. Lifetime to lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And every now and then, the friend will remind us, you've forgotten who you are. And so, being attached to the mind, you feel all the sorrow and the pain and the anger and the regret. And it's true. Please know, it's true. It's true for the mind. And so slowly, we have to be able to see our mind as separate. There's me looking at my own mind. When we're very emotional, it's very hard to have that gap and to see the mind as separate. But in moments of clarity and in moments of satsang, we get to see that little glimpse of the mind being separate. And we hold on to that little glimpse. And when we're strong enough, we try to make that gap between mind and me little bigger and little bigger and then even bigger until we can very clearly see mind. And mind will feel whatever the mind feels. And mind will think whatever the mind thinks. But we also have an intellect. And so if we go back to the story of Surichi and Suniti, intellect is that higher thinking that can look at the mind and then guide. If we identify with only the mind, mind will pull us in every single direction. We'll be exhausted. So when we identify with higher thinking, we don't need to give in to the mind's desires. We don't need to give in to the mind's. We can see that it's there and see the slight gap between mind and me. The stronger we get at seeing that gap, there is acceptance. Whichever emotion comes, the higher thinking will, what purpose does this serve? Is it bringing me closer to Bhagavan? Someday we won't want to think. It's okay. But not today. Some days we should think it. This, what I'm feeling, what purpose does it serve? Is it bringing me closer to Bhagavan? Like Daksha's pride got changed to devotion, Dhruv's desire got changed to devotion, like Hindu's ambition got to devotion, and Puranjana's ignorance got changed to devotion. Whatever we feel, let it get changed to devotion. I'm going to repeat. Some days We don't want to hear this. Okay. Bhagwan is compassionate. Few days are okay. At the time, he alone gives us, he alone is our shelter and our refuge. We fill our hearts with him. Mera nath hare giridhari. Mera nath hare giridhari. Radhe pyare Krishna Murari. Radhe Hare Krishna Murari. Meera Nath Hare Giridhari. Vrindavan ki Rasa Vihari. Vrindavan ki Rasa Vihari. Bhakti Krishna Murari. Bhakta Udari Krishna Murari. Jagata Udari Krishna. Jagata Udari Krishna Murari. Meera Nath Hare Giridhari. Radhe Pyari Krishna Murari. Meera Nath Hare Giridhari. Meera Nath Giridhari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Devaya. Sitting still, dissolving all your senses in the image of Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Dissolving your very breath into Bhagavan. Surrendering our will to His will. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet, asana satkamaya, tamaso ma gamaya, mrityurma mritam gamaya. Om Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.